Welcome to another video, everybody. It's good to see you as always, and today I have an absolute treat for you. We are going to go over the most electrifying, the most red hot, icy cold Sorc builds of Season 5, the most powerful ones you absolutely have to try before the end of the season. Naturally, as you'd expect, all of these builds are able to do the hardest content in the game. Tier 8 hordes are absolutely no problem whatsoever. Tormented bosses might as well not be there. And you can push extremely far into the pit if you are into torturing yourself. And actually, the number one build on this list is the current highest clear of pit out of every class in Season 5. So you could argue, arguably, the strongest build in Season 5. And I will, as always, include build guides from some of the most respected, nay, the best sorcerers in the entire world. But first, let's talk a little bit about the builds, what they do, why they're good, and why you might want to pick one of them over the other. And kicking us off is a build for those of you who like lightning builds, want to channel that inner Emperor Palpatine type stylish stuff, and that is Chain Lightning by our boy over at Mobalytics, Lurkin. Now, what's really interesting about this build is it uses a very interesting tech between Andariel's Visage and Starlight Aspect. What happens here, in short, is that you have life on hit from Andariel's Visage, which is triggered multiple times a second through just the sheer chaotic mass of damage that you're doing. Starlight Aspect then refunds your resources when you overheal. So you just heal so much that it's just all going into Starlight Aspect and giving you a whole bunch of mana for free, and it allows you to maintain this absolutely insane casting without having to really ever worry about your mana. Making even better use of this is the use of Axial Conduit, which is the new unique that was introduced with the season. Allows your Chain Lightning to come back to you, rotate around you, and then go back out again, so long as you don't run out of mana, which with this setup is like practically never. So really interesting, cool tech, makes use of a new unique as well, so it's a build that hasn't been possible before. So right away, for those of you looking for something a little bit new, you know, got a bit of a shine to it, then this is already going to be a very attractive pick. As for the other strengths this build has, the DPS is definitely one of them. Like I said, none of these builds are going to have any problem clearing all of the content in the game, so this is almost just like an instant checkbox for all of them. The visuals, this is a love it or hate it type deal. Like, it is insane. It's almost impossible to see what the hell is going on because there's just lightning absolutely everywhere. So if that's your cup of tea, then this is definitely a strength, but you know, depending on who you are, this might be a negative instead. And of course, that healing that we talked about is absurd. As long as you are not being one shot, you are not dying to anything, you are going to heal through the most absurd stuff, so that's not something you're really ever gonna have to worry about. Like most Sorc builds as well, you have a whole bunch of defensives at your disposal as well. You'll be spending the majority of your time fully barriered, and mobility is absolutely hands down the best in the game. So for speed farming, just general content across the board is so good when playing the Sorc. And finally, this one's kind of a bit in both camps as a strength and a weakness, but it is semi-gear dependent. You do need to get the Axial Conduit. However, this build can perform pretty well without any uber uniques, which is something that most builds don't do anymore. And then another weakness to be aware of is that, at least compared to the other builds, the single target is not the strongest suit of this build. It will absolutely do the hardest bosses in the game, but like I said, it's just not as fast as the others. And then I guess like a little extra one, it is a lot of buttons to press. Most Sorc builds are like this. You kind of have to play like a Mozart song with the keyboard in order to get like the highest efficiency from them, because you have literally no cooldowns across the board on most of these builds. Something to be aware of if you're somebody who doesn't like builds that play that way. Now, moving on to the next build, we're going to be covering what was previously the best build in Season 4, and it is still really strong this Season 2. It is, of course, the return of Firebolt, and this one will be presented by Makuna, the god of Sorcs. Now, not a lot has changed with this build. You can still expect the same absolutely insane single target DPS. You'll be blowing the ass off any tormented boss and pit boss that's stupid enough to cross your path. It is really, really good in the pits. I think currently Makuna holds the record with a 150 for this build, which is absurd. That is like higher than every other class is able to do on their strongest builds. So a huge contender for pushing the pit. Hordes are absolutely no problem whatsoever either. As far as the strengths go, it's the single target damage that really shines here. This one is going to be really, really good for those of you who are looking for something that is super, super strong at bossing. If you're doing carries for your mates, anything like that, then you may want to lean toward this one. It is just overall one of the strongest builds, but it leans more heavily to that than it does to the AoE side of things. And that, I think that has to be like the first weakness. Its AoE is not fantastic, so even though the hordes are absolutely no problem, you would get better performance from the other builds on the list because you'd be able to kill more enemies per second because the horde just kind of surrounds you from all angles. And Firebolt is a very directional attack. It's like just the small little firebolt, and if you hit it through a firewall, of course you get this 3 splits, but that of course is still only 3 firebolts as opposed to just filling the room up with lightning bolts, for example. And it is clunky to play as well. I think a lot of these builds, you could probably say this off, you know, you have a lot of buttons to press, and that can be quite a daunting thing for a player that's, you know, new to the game or new to Sorc. But once you get it down to a science, you really kind of just AFK it. But as far as Diablo goes, it is kind of hard to play. And then the last weakness has to be the gear requirements. Now, you don't need a ton of uber uniques for this, but you do need to hit certain tempers, masterwork rolls, a cooldown reduction, stuff like that, which is going to make this more of a late game build, more so than the chain lightning one that we just covered. But then again, you could look at this as a progression away from the chain lightning build into this one. Certainly the chain lightning is very, very good for sort of mid to late game, whereas this one is going to require that you've played quite a bit of the hordes and got some materials and some good gear behind you by now. That being said, it's all listed for you to read in the build guide, which would be in Makuna's video, which is linked, of course, down in the description if you want to check that out. And finally, and I think probably not too many people surprised, the #1 build for the Sorc this season is Lightning Spear, or Shotkuna's Lightning Spear, because we are looking at Makuna's version of this, which is hands down got to be the best, currently holding the world record for the highest pit cleared out of anybody on any class. So you absolutely have the credentials to back up saying that this is the best build for the Sorc or in the entire game at this current moment in time. And what it does well is everything. It is really good at everything. It's extraordinarily fast. The DPS is absolutely insane. Its AoE potential is insane, and it is pretty easy to play when compared against the other ones because really all you're doing is spamming Lightning Spear, but you are going to be spamming it a whole bunch. So there's really not any specifics to get into here. It is just literally the best across the board at everything. However, and the reason why that this has even any weaknesses to talk of anyways, is the gear requirement. It is very high and very specific. It's unlikely and probably just not recommended that you try to go straight into this build. This is a final version build that I would recommend working through another build first, because otherwise you're just not going to be getting the same experience that you'd be seeing on the screen or seeing in streams or anything like that. You could say it also isn't really the best at single target, but I mean, with the speed it deletes single targets, it's really not that much of a problem, to be honest. But yeah, really having to hone in on, you know, an issue, and that would be the gear dependency. But I mean, that's to be expected of a build that is so goddamn good at everything. It is absolutely insane. If you've seen this one in action, it does billions on billions on billions of DPS. You just have spells going off all over the place. It is pure chaos because there's a lot of auto-casted stuff going on where your lightning spears are proccing other conjurations. You've got frozen orbs coming out of your backside, and it's just pure unadulterated chaos and tons of damage and fun. Definitely a pinnacle build that is very exciting to play and certainly something to look forward to and work toward. And those are the 3 top builds. There are actually a whole bunch. I could have made a much longer video on all of the A and B tier builds for the Sorc that do really, really interesting things like Meteor, like Blizzard, that are performing extremely well. I mean, like, these are very, very, very good builds. A lot of them are very capable at doing tier 8s and tormented bosses. But in the interest of just keeping the video a little bit shorter, if you want to check those ones out, we have a ton, an absolute metric shit ton of builds over on Mobalytics on our tier list if you want to check those out, or even our community builds, because we have a whole bunch from people like Makuna in there too. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a little like, and maybe tickle that subscribe button if you're feeling frisky. And thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Love ya. Bye.